So I don't think it's a real new Cold War. I think it's, right now we have what Americans call a hot war going on in Ukraine. There are people dying every day. And so the urgency that everyone has, not just the people of Italy, but the people of the United States, and nobody more than the people of Ukraine, is trying to figure out how we can end the war that's going on in Ukraine.
Usa Crowley, a year has passed since the start of Russia war in Ukraine. Now, how far we are from peace, in your opinion? And what the word peace mean in the current scenario?
Well, only one person can answer that question, and that's Vladimir Putin. He's the only one that can stop the war, and he could stop it today if he wanted to. What peace means is if the Ukrainians stop fighting, some people would say that's peace, but that means the end of Ukraine. So that's not really peace. If Putin stops fighting, then perhaps we will have peace again.
Last Monday, President Biden spoke from Kiev, the city where he has decided to come by surprise. In your opinion, what does the presence of the US president in the Ukrainian capital mean?
I think it's a symbol, and it's not just the president being there on Monday, but it's the Prime Minister of Italy being there on Tuesday as well. And what it's doing is showing the strong international solidarity that Ukraine has felt since the beginning of the conflict. And that is one of the fundamental misjudgments that Putin made when he invaded Ukraine. One misjudgment was he thought that he could roll over the country in a matter of days, and he underestimated the Ukrainian people and their willingness to fight for what they believe in. He also underestimated the unity of the democratic world, and not just the Western world. I note that when we had the vote at the UN, more than 140 countries supported Ukraine and opposed Russia. And what the President's visit and what Prime Minister Meloni's visit is doing is reinforcing that point, that even though it's been an entire year of a horrible conflict, the united front against Russia remains.
How has the war in Ukraine changed the relationship between the United States and the European Union? And can we say, are they easier or more difficult today than a year ago?
I think it really has fundamentally changed the relationship between Europe and the United States, between the European Union and the United States, between NATO and the United States. And what it has done, it has reinforced what's really important. And what's really important are our values that we share. So a lot of times in the past we have had fights that have become big fights in the press, but they were over relatively little things. Ukraine has showed us what is really important, and that's the values that we share, freedom, democracy, and those things. And so I think you see that, for example, with NATO. You saw Sweden and Finland asking to join the alliance. A year ago, no one could have imagined that these two countries with such strong historical neutrality policies would want to join the Western alliance. But when they saw what happened in Ukraine, they felt threatened, and they felt that they should be with the people who share their values. I think you also see it in the European Union. For example, we have a new initiative in the United States, the Inflation Reduction Act, which is meant to transition to clean fuels and help the climate, but it also includes some big investments for the United States. And that has been controversial for some European countries who are worried that it will alter the investment flows or create investments in the United States instead of Europe. In the past, I think that would have been a much larger conflict that would have been played out almost every day between leaders and on the newspapers. But this time what we have is we have a working group in Brussels, and the United States and the European leaders are sitting down and they're discussing what the European concerns are and what the United States can and cannot do to address those. And that's the way it really should be. And ironically, those are all the results of the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
What do you think of Antony Blinken's word on the military aid that China is allegedly providing to Russia? And how concerned are you about Chinese meddling in the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine?
No, I mean, I think China has a fundamental choice to make. They have always, in the UN system and in the international system, said that they support the rule of law, they support the UN Charter. This is a big test on whether that's how true that is. Our vice president was in Munich last week, I think Friday she gave her speech, and she noted with concern that Beijing has been deepening its relationship with Moscow. And her point was that looking ahead, any kind of lethal assistance from China to help Russia in its invasion of Ukraine would only reward aggression, extend the killing, and prolong the war.
Do you think a sort of, well, new Cold War is going to begin about that?
Well, I mean, the Cold War was in a different time, and Europe looked differently there. I mean, the thing to remember is Poland and Eastern Europe were all behind the Iron Curtain before. Now they're all on the Western side, if there is a new Iron Curtain. Finland and Sweden were neutral throughout. They have now decided that they share more values with NATO than they do with Russia. So I don't think it's a real new Cold War. I think it's, right now we have what Americans call a hot war going on in Ukraine. There are people dying every day. And so the urgency that everyone has, not just the people of Italy, but the people of the United States, and nobody more than the people of Ukraine, is trying to figure out how we can end the war that's going on in Ukraine.
What do you think of Silvio Berlusconi's claim that the war in Ukraine is fault of Zelensky and Kiev government, and how his words reflects in relation between US and the Italian government?
Well, first I would like to say it's very great that former Prime Minister Berlusconi lives in a free country where he has freedom of speech. And he can say whatever he would like to say, and all of us defend his right to say whatever he wants to say. I would note that Alexei Navalny does not have that right in Russia. I would note that if anyone in Russia speaks up against Putin and the war, they wind up in jail or deported. So that's the first comment. The second part about the relationship with Italy, the relationship with Italy has been very strong. It's been strong since the end of the Second World War. It's been even stronger in recent years. Prime Minister Draghi was respected around the entire world. Prime Minister Meloni has gotten the relationship with the United States off to a very good start. She has been consistent in her Ukraine policy throughout, even when she was in the opposition. And the government now, even Forza Italia and Liga, where you sometimes see some statements, what matters, I think, is what you look at what they do. And you look at the votes in Parliament. And Forza Italia and Liga and Fratelli have all remained united on the votes on Ukraine, and many of the opposition parties as well, voting third poll, and PD voting with them as well. So I don't think that those remarks have affected the bilateral relationship at all. I think you see evidence of that just yesterday. The President of the United States went to Ukraine unexpectedly. When he came back, one of the first things he did when he landed was he had a conversation with Prime Minister Meloni, who was getting ready to go to Ukraine. And once again, I think that really symbolizes the unity of the Western world. If you look at the readouts of the calls from the Prime Minister's office and from the White House, they are nearly identical. And I think that's because we have nearly identical goals.
Last question. If we meet again in a year, in your opinion, would we still talk about an ongoing war in Ukraine, or would we tell a different story?
Well, all of us hope that we will not be talking about an ongoing war in a year. And once again, nobody hopes that more than the people of Ukraine. I think in a year, regardless, we still will be talking about Russia's invasion of Ukraine because of some of the questions that you had before. What does this mean for international law? What does this mean for the UN Charter? What does this mean for a relationship between the European Union and the United States? What does this mean for NATO, which previously had transitioned away from Article 5 territorial defense and more into some expeditionary, how do we make sure that Europe is at peace by helping other countries? Now it's a refocusing on the core reasons that the alliance was set up in the first place, which was how do we make sure that our countries that share democratic values remain free and able to exercise those values.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.